Giannis Antetokounmpo just won his first NBA title, with one of the greatest finals series we have ever seen from a single player, some of the most iconic moments in finals history, and arguably the greatest closeout game in finals history. And this really is an amazing accomplishment for one of the generational talents that has blessed this game, and one of the best individual growth and development stories, as well as one of the best team growth and development stories in league history. But this got me thinking, who is the next Giannis Antetokounmpo? And after spending hours thinking about it, I came to the realization that the next Giannis Antetokounmpo simply doesn't exist. But before we get into today's video, if you're new and you like basketball, I really think you would love this channel. So if you haven't already, feel free to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell to be notified whenever I release a video. I make videos to take elements from film essays and apply them to basketball. So if that's something that interests you, this is the channel for you. I'm trying to reach 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year, so doing all of these things would be a big help to me. Let's try to get 100 likes on this video so YouTube will recommend it to others. But with that being said, let's get right into the video. I have a few reasons why the next Giannis doesn't exist. First of all, I just don't believe in the concept of the next insert player name here. I just think it's a lazy exploitation. I think it puts unnecessary expectations and pressure on young athletes, and I think every player is unique in their own way, and keeping them in a box confined to the expectations of someone else just isn't right. The second reason is that Giannis is just such a unique talent that I truly believe the chances of finding someone who is similar to him is almost impossible. First of all, his development curve and physical growth is insane. He wasn't expected to be what he has become when he got drafted at all. He was a high upside project player from Greece entering the league, and he quickly developed into a versatile all-around wing. Then he developed into an all-star power forward. From there, he developed into one of the most dominant players the game has ever seen. And this is really an unheard of development curve, so the chances of a player doing this are very slim. It's why I don't like when people compare the stats of young players to all-star, all-NBA, or even all-time great players when they were in their first few years in the league, especially considering all-time great players have had outlier development curves, which is uncommon and not a norm. Like Josh Jackson's points per game, rebounds per game, and blocks per game through his first two NBA seasons are better than James Harden's were through his first two NBA seasons. And the assists per game, steals per game, free throw attempts, 2-point field goal percentage, and overall field goal percentage for Josh Jackson in his first 2 years are very close to what Harden's were in his first 2 years. Granted, James Harden was a significantly better free throw shooter and 3-point shooter, and overall was more efficient, but I still think the point stands that they had similar numbers through the first 2 years of their careers. And while Josh Jackson has seemingly somewhat turned it around in Detroit, and he's still only 24 years old, I highly doubt that he would be on the trajectory that James Harden was by his 4th or 5th season. But with that tangent out of the way, let's talk about the other things that make Giannis such an outlier when it comes to his NBA career. And that starts with his physical gifts. Giannis entered the league at 6 feet 9 inches tall and 196 pounds at the wing spot. Since then, he's grown 2 inches and he's gained 46 pounds of muscle. Giannis today stands at 6 feet 11 inches tall, he weighs 242 pounds and has a 7'3" wingspan. He also has elite speed for a wing, let alone a big, insane lateral movement skills, and a good vertical. And you have one of the most insane athletes that the sport has ever seen. It only takes him 14 steps and 5 dribbles to go coast to coast. So I think this alone makes Giannis an outlier that just shouldn't be compared to anyone. However, contrary to what quote-unquote real hoopers and James Harden would want you to believe, Giannis isn't an all-time great player just because he's almost 7 feet tall and really athletic. I wouldn't say Giannis has a deep scoring bag, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have a handle. I would say that Giannis has a pretty good handle. It's not elite, but far from bad, and definitely well above average for a power forward. He has great body control when finishing around the basket, he knows how to control his body to finish at difficult angles, and he knows how to finish over defense and overpower his defenders just because he's that dominant of a paint scorer. He's also a very good passer as well. That's something that's been noticeable since his third NBA season. He's not a good shooter right now, but he's not afraid to take open looks either. Sometimes I think he's a bit too brave with some of those attempts, but I'd rather have someone be overconfident than not confident at all. So you have an elite finisher around the basket that's a dominant scorer within 15 feet of the basket. He's not afraid of contact, he's a good passer, and at the very least, he isn't a non-shooter with no confidence at 6'11", 242 pounds. On defense, he's dominant as well. He may not be a man-to-man, put him on island against the opposing team's best player, although I think he's more than capable of doing that. He can switch, he can drop, he can head, he can defend on the perimeter, he can defend the paint. He really can do it all on defense, and when you have that kind of versatility on defense, using only one aspect of defense as the standard for defensive value is just flat out ridiculous. So the idea of a player having outlier physical tools and athleticism, being a dominant paint scorer to the point where it cancels out any shooting problems, and being a good passer as well, while also being elite at almost all aspects of defense and having an out of this world motor on both ends of the floor, I think it's very clear that's a hard expectation to live up to, and it's why the idea of a quote-unquote next Giannis will never exist. However, I still wonder what a quote-unquote next Giannis kind of prospect would look like, so I have decided to give you my interpretation of what a quote-unquote Giannis level prospect would look like. I know I said quote-unquote like 5 or 6 times. Deal with that. To make it very clear, I am not describing a prospect that actually exists in the real world. I'm literally making this prospect up. This is not a prospect that actually exists. It's not a real person. It's just a hypothetical. And I am basing this hypothetical prospect off the idea that he shows indicators that suggest his ceiling is what Giannis has developed into as a player. Also, this isn't just me copying and pasting what Giannis is now. Some things will be different. Trust me. And the final point is that I'm going to be using pictures of various wing/big prospects in this section of the video from both past, present, and future. This is not me saying that any of these prospects are the next Giannis, because I don't think any of them are, because again, like I mentioned earlier, I don't think the next Giannis exists. This is just me needing place marker prospects to represent what I'm trying to say, because it's a lot better than me using my awful jersey swap attempts or just a blank screen. So let's actually get into what this hypothetical prospect would look like. First of all, he would be a power forward prospect. Yes, I know Giannis was a small forward prospect, but given his listed height and weight back in 2013, and comparing that to how we view those kind of prospects with those kind of frames now, he would probably be listed more as a skilled power forward than a small forward. So because of this, the hypothetical prospect would be a power forward. When it comes to the frame, this prospect I don't think would start out at 6'11", 242 pounds. If he was, he would be classified as a center prospect at 17 to 19 years old. So because of this, I do think that I'm going to give the prospect a frame to kind of grow into. And I think because of this, I have settled on 6 feet 10 inches tall, which is an inch taller than Giannis was during the pre-NBA process, but also around 220 pounds with a 7'3" wingspan. The reason he's bigger than Giannis was during the pre-draft process is because in order to dominate the high school level and college level and give off the impression that he can potentially be what Giannis is now, I don't think the frame that Giannis had when he was in this pre-NBA process works, just because of the fact that before the NBA, I don't think any of us saw Giannis overseas and thought, yeah, he'll be a fourth of what he's become now as an NBA player. So I decided to give this prospect a frame that can fill out, but also give him a physical advantage at the previous levels. Because for a power forward prospect at 6'10", 220 pounds, it might be a bit light at the NBA, but in college and high school, that's dominant. And I also think it's more likely that a prospect goes from 220 pounds to 240 pounds than it is for a prospect to go from 196 pounds to 240 pounds. On top of the frame, this prospect will have good end-to-end speed, good vertical leaping ability, and lateral movement skills. Basically, this prospect is a freak athlete. But like with Giannis in real life, it takes more than just physical tools and athleticism to dominate. I think a big emphasis will be on how this prospect has some potential to be a dominant player on both ends of the court. On offense, a lot of the focus will be on his finishing around the basket, his handle, and his passing ability. I don't think this prospect will necessarily be as dominant of a paint scorer as Giannis, which is fine just because of the fact that that's hard for any player to match. But I still think he will be a good paint scorer, just not to the level that Giannis is. And because he won't be to the level of Giannis as a paint scorer, which is a big part of Giannis' game, I do think I will compensate for this by having this prospect be a baseline average level shooter. He's not going to be a sniper from 3, but he's also not going to be a bad shooter like Giannis is. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, Giannis with an average jump shot is unstoppable, which is true, and that's actually a terrifying thought to think about for players trying to guard him if he did have an average jumper. However, I'm not adding an average shooting ability to Giannis. I'm adding it to a prospect with somewhat similar movement skills to Giannis, but is at the most half of the paint scorer Giannis is, which is still pretty good, and he will have potential to grow into a dominant paint scorer due to his physical gifts. So while he may not be a dominant paint scorer that Giannis is, he still will have moments and still will have movement skills that are reminiscent of Giannis, a frame similar to Giannis, and a play style that is just maybe slightly different. And what I mean by that is, where Giannis is about 73.8% of his offense within 16 feet and 26.2% of his offense in the long jump shot territory, this prospect will be about 60% of his offense within the 16 feet and 40% of his offense in the long jump shot territory. On defense, this prospect will show he can play multiple defensive coverages, hold his own on switches, defend the paint, and perimeter as well. Overall, this is a versatile defensive prospect. Again, this play style is somewhat different, but I still believe the Giannis comp will come from the frame and athleticism, as well as being versatile on both ends of the floor, with the handle and passing being the emphasis on offense, and the ability to be good at multiple defensive skills being highlighted on defense. When it comes to the weaknesses of this prospect, I think that we'll see things like shot selection, being a bit too jump shot happy, which is something that you have kind of noticed with Giannis. I think it'll be more emphasized because his shooting baseline is better than what Giannis's is. So I definitely think there'll be a bit of emphasis on that. Playing out of control, something that Giannis probably struggled with a bit early on. Going too fast, leading to some offensive fouls, things like that. Decision making as a passer, maybe we'll try to force the pass a bit too much. That's not something that I would say is specific to a Giannis problem, more of a young player with passing skills, especially among wing players with passing skills. They tend to do this sometimes. Turnovers, really what I've described a lot up to this point, with the decision making as a passer, playing out of control, things like that. And defensive awareness, what young prospect doesn't go through some of these problems. Every young prospect has seemingly had some defensive lapses here and there. So when it comes to the weaknesses, these are the things that I think we highlighted. Some of them are Giannis related, but most of these things are very much just like young things all players struggle with. In high school, this prospect would probably put up Zion Williamson type numbers with a few more assists, I would say. Probably something like 35 points per game, 15 rebounds per game, 5 assists per game, and 5 blocks per game. That may seem like much, but given it's high school and given that this is supposed to be an outlier athlete with real basketball skills, I think that this is something that would probably happen. Now, these numbers will probably look a lot closer to like 18 to 20 points a game, 10 rebounds a game, 4 assists per game, and 4 blocks per game if he played on a Montverde or an IMG. In college, he would probably put up something like 22 points a game, 11 rebounds a game, 4.5 assists per game, and 3 blocks per game. Slightly less numbers, but still impressive numbers if he chose to play overseas or took the GIL route. Something really similar to if his high school numbers were on an IMG or a Montverde rather than, National Player of the Year numbers, which he would be in serious consideration for. I would bet on him winning it, actually. This prospect would be the consensus first overall pick in whatever draft this prospect would hypothetically be in. Not just like, oh, he's the number 1 guy, but there's guys behind him. Like, no, there's no one behind this prospect in the hypothetical situation because he's just that good. Again, this prospect isn't Giannis by any stretch of the imagination. I know that. Not the same path, not the same story, not even the same prospect. However, I think I put together a prospect that would have the path, the physical tools, and the skills that would have the mainstream calling him the next Giannis. But what I just described to you would be like by far the best prospect I've ever evaluated. He would be a better prospect than Luka Doncic even. And that really tells you something, because Luka Doncic is the best prospect by far that I've ever evaluated, and one of the best prospects ever. And I think that this hypothetical prospect would be even better than that. I think there might be an argument, over the idea, okay, he didn't play great competition, but Luka was dominating overseas, but I think if you had a prospect that was this good overseas, he would dominate as well, in my opinion. But that's just how I feel based off what I've described to you. But because I believe he's a better prospect than what Luka would be, I do think that means he's going to be in contention for like best prospect of all time. And I'd like to remind you that this is not a real prospect. This is not someone that exists in the real world. This is something that I made up based off the hypothetical of the idea of a prospect showing the potential to be what Giannis Antetokounmpo has become. And the reason why he's made up is because he doesn't exist, and it probably won't ever exist. Because the idea of a prospect reaching the heights Giannis has as a player are there. It's something that's basically impossible. So the idea of a prospect that has the potential to live up to what Giannis has become should also be impossible. And I think I created that with this prospect. Again, it's not exactly Giannis as a prospect. There are differences. He's a bit better of a shooter than Giannis is, but he's not quite the paint scorer, but still a good one. There are differences, but again, it's not exactly creating the next Giannis. It's really creating what the media would say the next Giannis would be, even if it's justified or not. And I tried to make it somewhat justified, but even in this scenario, I don't know if it's justified. So that's why I made this video, because it goes to show you the lengths you have to go to create a hypothetical prospect that could potentially be what Giannis has become is impossible. Because what Giannis is doing and what Giannis has become is not only an unfair expectation to hold a prospect to, but an impossible expectation to hold a prospect to. But that's the end of this video. If you made it to this point, thank you so much. Again, if you haven't already, like, subscribe, do all those things, be a big help to me. Let me know what you think about this video. I had a lot of fun making it. It was a concept I've always been somewhat interested in. I made videos about it on the other channel, but I definitely think that I was able to articulate what I wanted to say just better in this video. This is something like, just the idea of what if someone that could be as good as Giannis, like, what would that look like with the idea of having the indicators of someone being that good, or having a similar skill set. Like, I always kind of thought about that, because I don't think we've seen it. I don't know if we'll ever see it. So I just had a lot of fun working on the script. This is probably the most fun I've had working on the script of a video, like, ever. And I had a lot of fun editing it as well, but definitely the script writing was the most fun part. So again, I really hope you guys liked it. I would really appreciate it if you would leave a like. It would mean a lot to me, help this video get found by more people. But with that being said, have a nice day.